for continuing to support the festival. The festival is a festival that has grown tremendously over the years, and it requires the support of the Nevis Island administration, the Secretariat and the committee for many, many years, and we say thanks to him and his team for the Herculean task of having a successful festival. I want to thank as well our many sponsors who came on board this year. I did indicate how expensive it is to undertake. The administration cannot do it on its own, and we are always welcoming partnerships and partners and sponsors. And so we thank the sponsors, and of course we anticipate your support again for next year and the years to come. I also want to say thanks to the security forces. They did a marvelous job. Over the past few years, we've had the reputation of having an incident and accident-free, especially when it comes to crime and criminality. Thank God that we were free of crime and criminality again this year, and the security forces did a tremendous job in ensuring that. Of course, we know that we had a very unfortunate incident on Juve morning, and apart from that, the Culturama was pretty accident and incident-free. Of course, we want to say thanks to all who took part and all who supported and came out in their numbers to support the events. I think you all were generally pleased based on most of the feedback we have had. I want to say thanks to the many, many persons, our returning nationals who came home, our brothers and sisters from St. Kitts who came over, and all who supported the festival. The numbers were out. And, you know, a lot of the times, Madam President, when we speak about Culturama, we fail to acknowledge the economic impact that it has on the island of Nevis. And not only on the island of Nevis, but on St. Kitts as well. Because when we look and see the kind of money that is turned around in the society or the island or in the economy because of Culturama, when we look at the money that turns around in the supermarkets, in the grocery stores, in the restaurants, in the accommodation, hotels, villas, private homes, when we look at the business that is being done between St. Kitts and Nevis with our ferry operators, our taxi drivers, when we look what goes on in the even the hair salons and the beauty parlors and the barber shops, and generally there's so much money being turned around in the economy. Our vendors, those who take part in Culturama, our vendors who render services for the festival, there is a tremendous level of economic activity within the island during Culturama, and that is something that we have often overlooked, and that is something that we should continue to pay attention to. A lot of money is spent during the festival. Madam President, as we look forward to next year is a milestone year. Next year is Culturama 50, and it is going to be something to behold. I know that we have been advertising it as a homecoming, and I want to say it here again, that it will be a homecoming celebration. And we have been asking persons in the diaspora in particular, all of our Nevisians who are living overseas, wherever you are, we are asking you to come home for Culturama 50 next year. I know that the hype has been created and there has been a lot of interest that has been generated, Madam President. I have notified the committee already that the expectation will be very high for next year. Very, very high. We have been getting a lot of interest from persons or our nationals living overseas. I was fortunate to speak to quite a number of them during the festival, and all of them have indicated that they are coming back next year. Not only coming back, but they're coming back with many of their relatives. We are hearing that people have already been booking. In England, people have been booking their flights already. I understand that some of the flights are almost booked out already. Someone called me last week. I need the dates because my relatives are coming home and they need to start paying down on their accommodation. And so the interest is high. We are hearing from St. Croix that we need to put on additional flights because they want to be able to get out of St. Croix. People are wondering where they're going to stay. And so the hype is created, the expectation is high, and I think we on the island of Nevis, the committee and Nevis in general, we have the ability to rise to the occasion and to meet people's expectations. And so we are encouraging once again all who are out there, please start making your plans now to be in Nevis for the homecoming. Our slogan competition has already been opened. It will close on the 15th of September, and so we have started very early to plan. The moment Culturama 49 was over, we have started the planning for 50. And as a matter of fact, we have already been getting contestants who have been lining up at the festival secretariat to register for next year. And so we are anticipating a festival like no other for Culturama 50. And I want to thank once again all who were responsible for a successful 49, and we look forward to welcoming everyone for a hugely successful Culturama 50. May it please you, Madam President. Thank you.
Recognize the member for Nevis 1.
Madam President, good morning, and good morning to my colleagues on this side of the aisle. Good morning to members opposite, persons in the gallery, those who are listening and viewing. Madam President, I rise to make a very brief statement as per the order paper. And I want, Madam President, to focus my very brief statement on water. First and foremost, Madam President, I want to apologize to the people of Nevis. I want to apologize, Madam President, for the periodic interruption of our water supply in various parts of Nevis over the last few months. And Madam President, it is due to numerous factors. Increase in consumption, reduction in rainfall. Madam President, it also was due to the fact that because of the drought, our various wells throughout the island of Nevis were not recharging as rapidly as they ought to have. And Madam President, our success have also created some challenges for us, because even late in July and early August, the tourism sector on the island of Nevis seemed to have been, Madam President, doing reasonably well. So I want to apologize to the people of Nevis for that interruption. Madam President, I've been told that somewhere on social media that someone said that there was no water in Nevis. And I found it strange, Madam President, that someone would say that there was no water on the island of Nevis. Madam President, in the month of January, the island of Nevis produced some 52,335,920 imperial gallons of water on the island of Nevis. Let me call that figure again. 52,335,920 imperial gallons of water on the island of Nevis. In the month of February, Madam President, the island of Nevis produced some 41,830,000 imperial gallons of water on the island of Nevis. In May, Madam President, the island of Nevis produced some 52,414,000 imperial gallons of water on the island of Nevis, Madam President. And just last month, July, the island of Nevis produced some 49,987,080 imperial gallons of water on the island of Nevis. But still, there is no water on Nevis. Madam President, the fact is that over the last few months, as indicated earlier, we face a challenge. Consumption have increased, so it created an imbalance in the system, Madam President. And as a result, we have had to do some water rationing. And you know, Madam President, I went and I checked my fellow Caribbean countries to see who else may have been engaged in water rationing. And Madam President, my good friends in Barbados had to do water rationing. Big Barbados had to do water rationing. My good neighbors across the Narrows had to do water rationing. You understand? My good friends in the Virgin Islands, both British and US, had to do water rationing. But still there is no water in Nevis. Madam President, I want to share with this Honourable House, with your permission, Madam President, and if you want to see the information, I would allow you to have a look at it before. From a high-ranking official at the Four Seasons Resort. With your permission, Madam President.
You may proceed, member.
Thank you. This, Madam President, was a note I received from a very high-ranking official at the Four Seasons Resort. Good day, Minister Brand. I just wanted to reach out to thank you for being there for us. I know I text you at odd times occasionally. I want you to remember that little statement, at odd times. I want you to remember that statement, madam, at odd times, occasionally. But I truly appreciate your partnership and speediness of help as our season is really grinding to a close. You won't likely hear from me regarding water too much, but know that we value your resourcefulness truly. That's it. Just a thank you. Be well and have a great week. Madam President, this note, and I want to dedicate this note, Madam President, to the manager, the operations manager, the entire staff of the Nevis Water Department for their hard work in some very difficult and turbulent time. This note, Madam President, and I can share it with anybody who wants to see it, comes from a high-ranking official at the Four Seasons Resort. You hear what he said, Madam President? At odd times. Madam President, and when he said odd times, he meant odd times, you know. 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock and thing in the morning, midnight, crying out for help that he have a situation, and we, Madam President, the Water Department, was able to be as accommodating as we possibly can. And, Madam President, it wasn't easy, you know. But I want to say, Madam President, to that very high-ranking official at the Four Seasons, we appreciate your sentiments, and as I said, I want to apologize to the people of Nevis for the inconvenience. Madam President, I want to say to the people of Nevis that we have not sat idly by on this matter, on this issue of water. Just last month, we have had on island a geologist who would have conducted some mapping exercise throughout the length and breadth of Nevis. And he has, Madam President, identified a number of areas where we can pursue some drilling exercises. He have identified, Madam President, 3 areas in particular that we expect would generate some very high-yielding wells. And we are in the process, Madam President, of finishing a document so that we can have at least 3 drillers tender for the job to drill these wells, Madam President. Madam President, we have gone a bit further. We have had some conversation with desalination providers. Just last week, I met with a particular desalination company. And this is a company, Madam President, that has desalination in Trinidad, that has desalination in St. Martin, in Anguilla, and in St. Thomas. And what I like about the St. Thomas setup, Madam President, what I love about the St. Thomas setup is being managed and operation managed and being run, Madam President, by a division. A young man, Madam President, yes. Ah, boy. Ah, yes. A young man from right up in Stony Grove. And he, Madam President, we have been in conversation because I have to say to the people of Nevis that this is a proven and reliable technology for the island of Nevis. We know, Madam President, that the energy cost is high, but we are expecting that geothermal will come on stream very soon so that the cost. But here it is, Madam President. Here it is. A division in St. Thomas managing the water resources, the desalination water resources in St. Thomas. You understand, Madam President? As the Premier rightly said, a young man from Stony Grove, a young man I pitch marble with in Stony Grove, play cricket with, and he understands what this desalination is all about, Madam President. And we are moving in that direction. So, Madam President, when there are those saying to the world that there is no water on the island of Nevis, I've just given some numbers, Madam President.
And numbers don't lie.
I've just given some numbers. I have just said, Madam President, in this honorable house that a high-ranking official at the Four Seasons is saying thank you, Madam President. And Madam President, last night I journeyed over to St. Kitts to take in a little of the CPL game. And Madam President, there was two gentlemen from Nevis. They have spent a number of years overseas. I do not know their political persuasion. I know them personally, but I do not know their political persuasion. And the conversation, Madam President, was very encouraging and enlightening. One I know resides in the Virgin Islands, and one I know resides in the United States of America. Two divisions. And you know what they were talking about, Madam President? You know what they were talking about? They have said in that bus ride that Nevis is moving.
Big time.
Nevis is moving. And Madam President, they did not hold any water in their mouth to say that what they have seen, they came home for Culturama and they have stayed on for CPL and they have saying that what they have seen on the island of Nevis is very much encouraging. But yet, no water in Nevis. And the sky is falling down. And everything is going to happen. And nothing happened. But two divisions. Enjoying a bus ride, going to watch cricket. I did not provoke the conversation. They started it. I introduced myself, they introduced them, and Madam President, I want to say to our people, you know, I'm going to pivot a little bit. And I hope I don't get too political, but I think that this is the right place to get political. Statement by ministers. Statement by, Madam President, if I'm going off course, stop me. If I'm going off course, stop me. From what I've learned, Madam President, from what I've learned, the author of that statement who indicated that there was no water in Nevis was one who I am told, because I don't know, was in January, in February, in March, in April, in May, in June, in July, and in August, was all over telling people that they are the best thing since sliced bread to manage the affairs of Nevis. And the people of Nevis told them, go sit down. The people of Nevis told them, go sit down. And here it is, Madam President, they came back again after August, in September, in October, in November, and in December, with the same message. And the people of Nevis said to them, go sit down. The point that I'm trying to get to, Madam President, is I want to say to all of these folks who claim that they love this country, and they have the country's best interest at heart, that when they get behind their computers and their smartphones, speak well about the island of Nevis. Amen. Speak well about the island of Nevis. Forget about the politics. Amen. Forget about trying to take cheap political shots at whomever they want to take it at. When they're out there in the diaspora and have that platform, speak well of Nevis. Here it is, 2 Nevisians. And these are men who I know as a little boy who have been stalwart in this community, have spent years in the Virgin Islands and in the United States at home, saying, boy, Nevis is moving. Here it is, Madam President, a high-ranking official is saying, thanks. But there are some. And I want to, Madam President, today is, what day today is? 24th. 24th? Of August. Today is the 24th of August. 2023. And Madam President, we all know what is happening in the United States today, You know what is happening in the United States? Former president have to take a mugshot. He's been indicted. And Madam President, you know what one of the many charges are this morning for that former president? False statement. False statement. Imagine in America, they are indicting a former president for false statement. Maybe the legal advisor need to put something like those kind of things for false statement. Strangers to the truth, untruth. Madam President, I want to say to our people, you don't have to support this great blue CCM machine. You can support whomever you wish. But I want to appeal to all of us. Let us speak well of our country, Madam President. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary of independence next month. And our motto is country above self. You understand, Madam President? Country above self. And I want to encourage all of us, regardless of which political party we may support, let us debate the ideas. Let us debate the merit of the government's policy, Madam President. Let us not get in the habit of trying to destroy our country for political expedience, Madam President. Madam President, I want to say to all of us that we recognize that we do have a challenge. And the good minister with responsibility for culture have already signaled that next year is a homecoming. The Premier of the country, Madam President, has said that geothermal will be on stream. And the common denominator, Madam President, in those 2 statements and those 2 events that will happen on the island of Nevis is water. We must, Madam President, continue to do our very best to ensure that the island of Nevis not only has enough potable water for when all of these folks return home next year, and for when the Premier said to me that the drill is on the island to do the geothermal wells, we have enough water. And we will ensure, Madam President, that that is accomplished. Madam President, I want to pivot very quickly to a few road projects that is occurring here on the island of Nevis. One of our major road projects is the bypass road rehabilitation project. And I want to appeal to motorists, Madam President, that yes, there will be some disruption. There will be some diversion and there will be some inconvenience in their travel. The contractors has said to me that this project will last 100 days. And I want the people of Nevis to keep track of this timeline. Let us set our timeline, Madam President, from next Monday. Monday is what, the 28th. I want the whole of Nevis to track this project. They have said 100 days. And I want Nevis, working days, leave out Saturdays and Sundays, even though that they may work on those 2 days, Madam President. Track the project for 100 days. And we will see, Madam President, if we can keep that timeline. But I want to say to our people that yes, there will be some disruption and interruption. There will be some inconvenience. And I want to say to our people to please obey the flagmen and flagwomen on that project. We don't want to have any injuries, so I'm appealing to the general public. Madam President, we are also in the Cotton Ground area doing a road that has been dubbed the Banjo Road. And I see the smile on the face of the representative from St. Thomas's and the candidate also smiling, Madam President. Because I believe, Madam President, that we understand that for development on the island of Nevis, it must occur throughout the length and breadth of the island. That is our position, and that is what we will continue to do. I believe that that is a project that has been long in coming, and I'm indeed happy, Madam President, that we are now on the ground bringing some relief to those folks in the Cotton Ground area. Madam President, I will stop there, and I want to thank you, Madam President, for giving me the opportunity to make those brief statements as per the order paper. Thank you, and may it please you, Madam President.
Personal explanations. Public business. Bills, second and third readings.
I recognize the member for Nevis 2.
Good morning, Madam President. Good morning to my colleagues on this side and my colleagues on the opposition benches. Madam President, I rise to commence the debate and have read for a second time the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023. I believe it was on the 6th of July this year that that bill would have had its first reading. And we would have adjourned then to allow for public scrutiny and consultation. And we are now back in the hope that we could have the debate today, have the bill read a second time, debated, read, and hopefully with the support of the House passed. Madam President, the bill that is before us, the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023, seeks to advance the financial services industry on the island of Nevis. And the public would be aware that we have come from time to time to undertake amendments to various bits of legislation. Indeed, we have in the past repealed and replaced entire ordinances in an effort to ensure that the financial services industry on Nevis remains current, remains modern, and remains competitive. And the public may ask from time to time, well, why do you spend attention and so much time and give so much attention to the financial services industry? And the answer is simple, that it is a significant part of the economy of the island of Nevis. It not only generates direct revenue in terms of registration fees, renewal fees, and taxes to the Nevis Island Administration, but it also generates good quality jobs. It generates rental income for many who own premises around Charlestown, the capital, and elsewhere. And it also generates the activity for the island in terms of business. And so we feel, Madam President, this financial services industry, which started way back in 1984 and was expanded dramatically since 1996, that this industry deserves our attention. And if the public is wondering what I mean when I say it started in 1984, the Nevis Business Corporation Ordinance was actually passed in 1984. And that signaled the start of the financial services industry for the island of Nevis. However, the government of the day, the NRP-led government, saw it fit to give an exclusive arrangement to one company in 1984. I don't say that by way of criticism. I say that because that was the fact. And Morningstar Holdings obtained a monopoly on financial services from 1984 for 10 years until 1994, when that monopoly came to an end. I believe the thinking in 1984 by the government then was that this was a new industry and they wanted a partner that they could trust and rely on. And there was, because when we talk about financial services, a lot of people become fearful. We start to hear about money laundering, terrorist financing, and of course the dreaded blacklisting. And I am sure, no doubt, that the government of the day felt that this was a safe way to go. And that is the decision that they took. We can look back with the benefit of hindsight and say that hindsight, they say, your vision now is 2020 because you now have the benefit of seeing what would have happened. And we can question whether or not that was the right decision, but that was the decision nevertheless. And so the industry would not have started to expand considerably until 1994, when that monopoly ended and when we then saw new products being introduced. Nevis Limited Liability Company Ordinance, I believe that's the LLC legislation that came, the banking legislation that came, mutual funds legislation, insurance legislation, trusts that came, Nevis International Exempt Trust Ordinance, which has generated considerable business here on the island. All of those came after, but not only did new legislation come after the monopoly ended, but new businesses opened their doors. And so we did not any longer have just Morningstar Holdings. And a lot of trust companies opened their doors, and that generated new activity. A lot of banks were registered that generated new employment. And so we saw an exponential expansion. I remind people all the time that the British Virgin Islands, which has become a powerhouse in the financial services industry in the world, a global powerhouse, that the British Virgin Islands would have had a start to the industry at around the same time as Nevis, back in 1984. But they, unlike Nevis, did not grant any monopoly to any one entity. And so what we started to do in 1994, they had done from the inception. And the BVI today is, as I said, a global powerhouse. We are not quite there yet, Madam President, but we are working our way towards that. And I'm very pleased with the progress that is being made. In Nevis, the growth has been steady. It has been incremental, but there has been growth. In fact, I'm proud to say, as I lead the debate on this bill, that the number of registrations as of July 2022, and I'm talking about new registrations, across all financial services entities was 1,044. Put differently, so that I'm clear, the registrations from January to July 2022 was 1,044. The registrations from January to July 2023 stand at 2,061. So there has been an increase between January to July 2022 when compared to January to July 2023 of some 1,017 more entities registered, or some 97.4% increase in the number of entities registered. Of course, Madam President, new entities are being registered, and our staff, our regulations department, our staff at the registry will, from time to time, strike off companies from the register. So some are coming on, and some are also leaving because some are being struck off for a variety of reasons. And so that has an impact on the revenue that comes in from renewals. But I'm advised that the revenue that we would have earned as of July 2022 for that year, January to July 2022, was $7.1 million. The revenue earned thus far this year for the same period, January to July 2023, is $8.1 million. So we have seen, Madam President, is that the island of Nevis, in relation to this particular sector, is moving in the right direction. I have said to the officials at the registry that I see no reason why we should not be able to double our registrations and double our revenue for each year going forward over the next 5 years. And I've said that because we have not only embarked on a process of refining our legislation and ensuring that we remain on the cutting edge, but also investing in greater technology and also investing in marketing. And we have partnering with the sector in a significant way to undertake marketing efforts across the world for the financial services sector here. There are many, Madam President, who have announced the death of this sector from time to time. As they say, rumors of its death have been greatly exaggerated, because we have, notwithstanding the negativity surrounded the sector and the press that has been self-serving in many respects, generated by some who are quick to cast aspersions on us as a region while ignoring what is happening in their own countries. We have persevered, we have pressed on, and we have met our international obligations in a direct way by engaging in dialogue with the agencies that monitor the sector and ensuring that we remain on the cutting edge and that, most importantly, we remain compliant. And that is the backdrop to why we have come today. The bill today is not particularly remarkable. It seeks to do a few things, and I will go through the sections, Madam President. It seeks to create and make some amendments that have been proposed based on changes in the general industry standards regionally and internationally, and the need, the absolute need, for the industry here in Nevis to remain updated as well as to remain competitive. I would want to inform this House that changes that are proposed are always discussed with the industry. I say discuss because we don't always have unanimity. The industry does not always agree with everything, but we always engage with the industry. And so no one can say that they're taken by surprise when we come to this House on these matters. In fact, time and time again, Madam President, we have held off coming to the House when the industry leaders have said that they want an opportunity to opine or that they don't agree. And so our approach to legislation has been consultative, and we have engaged in ongoing dialogue with the industry. And so these changes are changes that have been discussed and that are now here as a consequence of changes in the international landscape, but also changes that will ensure our competitiveness is maintained. At Section 2, we have amended by deleting the definition of authorized custodian. As that appears in that section, the definition has been removed based on amendments to have all references in the ordinance related to bearer shares removed. I want to pause there. There has been an ongoing debate, Madam President, as to whether countries, jurisdictions should allow bearer shares. Bearer shares, so that the public understands. There are many lawyers in the room, so I know they would understand already. But for those who may not be lawyers or may not have had contact with the industry, and generally for the public, that bearer shares basically say that the shares belong to the bearer of those shares. And so there is not necessarily anybody's name on that share certificate. That share certificate doesn't say that it belongs to Mark Brantley, for example. It will merely say that it belongs to the bearer. Now, it is an excellent instrument in terms of ease of doing business. It is also potentially a dangerous instrument because unlike registered shares, which have a name attached to them and move in a particular way, where, for example, there has to be a record kept of that share moving from person A to person B, bearer shares are, as I said, owned by the bearer. And so it means that a bearer share can simply be delivered from person A to person B. And it renders it difficult to monitor from a regulatory point of view. Now, some years ago, Nevis took the position that we would not abolish bearer shares. Rather, we would seek to immobilize them. And the position that was taken then was that while we continued to allow bearer shares, those bearer shares had to be in the possession of an authorized custodian. And that way, we felt it would prevent the free transfer of the ownership of a company, as was hitherto the case. We have now, upon reflection and upon changes being made in the landscape, and as the industry evolves, come to the view that it is now time to outlaw bearer shares altogether and to remove the provisions in our law that allow for bearer shares. And so the authorized custodian, which was a creature created because we wanted to immobilize the bearer shares in the hands of a custodian, that creature is no longer necessary because the authorized custodian was authorized by the minister to act as a custodian for bearer shares only. So Section 2 has been amended to remove the definition of authorized custodian because, for the reasons that I have just set out, Madam President, we no longer will allow bearer shares in Nevis. We have added a new definition in the definition section, Section 2, for electronic signature. Madam President, in this regard, I will admit Nevis is a bit late to the party because other jurisdictions have long had the ability to allow documents to be filed with an electronic signature. And so what we're doing here is playing catch-up in our legislation. Again, so the House and the public understands, it used to be the position that the registry could only accept documents that had been physically signed. And we got the complaint from the service providers saying, in this modern age, when other people are filing electronically and using electronic signatures, why is Nevis still in the Stone Age, requiring people to sign handwritten signatures? And so we have now responded to that, Madam President, by introducing the provisions relevant to the electronic signature. Incidentally, as I looked at the explanatory memorandum prepared by the legal staff for this bit of legislation, I came across a term, and I'm not somebody who is ever too big to admit that I learned something. I learn something every day. And it said that our legislation now will allow electronic signatures. They will also allow something called a wet signature. You know what a wet signature is? I had never heard the term before. But apparently a wet signature is when you sign with pen and ink. So I think for those in here who knew it, I did not know it. So I went and did a quick check to find out what a wet signature is. So our legislation now, after we hope that this is passed today, will allow for documents to be filed with electronic signature or with a wet signature. So we have the option now. And the registry will be allowed to accept documents signed in either way. Section 4 of the ordinance, we are proposing by this legislation to amend by deleting subsection 8 in its entirety and replacing it with new provisions. The proposed amendment allows for electronic filing of documents at the registry. So not only are we moving to electronic signatures, we are also now moving to electronic filing at the registry. The existing provisions allow for the filing of physical documents at the registry, and this new option will allow for greater ease and convenience for both the registry staff and for service providers. The requirements for the documents filed electronically to be endorsed as filed still remains. What is important with this amendment is the fact that the date of receipt of payment for the document will be the proof of the actual filing of that document. I want service providers to hear me now. Filing without payment would not guarantee proof that the document has been filed. So the payment is important, and we could understand that because the government needs the revenue. The document filed would only be effective and valid as of the filing date noted on it. We are doing, therefore, two things, Madam President. We are modernizing in terms of the electronic signature now being permitted, and we are modernizing further by allowing documents to be filed electronically. What that does is that it enhances our ease of doing business. And I believe that that is important if we're going to build out the sector, that persons dealing with Nevis, choosing Nevis to invest and to have their financial services handled in Nevis, that we make it as easy and as seamless as possible for them to do business. I believe that this sector has long been asking for these types of initiatives, and we have come today to seek to amend accordingly. A new subsection 12 has been added to section 8, which allows for filing of documents which contain an electronic signature. Where an electronic signature is included on any document submitted for filing, the provision mandates the acceptance of that document by the registrar. Mandates is important because it means, therefore, that the registrar now can't refuse to accept because it's an electronic signature. So we have taken that step forward. And as I said, we have not sought to exclude those persons who prefer to do things the old-fashioned way. And so we are accepting electronic signatures and wet signatures in order to file documents. Section 9 of the ordinance, Madam President, has been amended by deleting the entire existing section, as that section previously dealt with notice to holders of bearer shares. In fact, I will come back to that theme time and time again, because what the drafters of the bill currently before the House have done is to seek, Madam President, wherever bearer shares were mentioned or dealt with under the ordinance, to delete and repeal those provisions and to put new provisions which reflect the new thinking by the government in relation to bearer shares. So section 9, which hitherto talked about notice to holders of bearer shares, that section has been removed in its entirety. The proposed amendment now imposes a general requirement in relation to notices which are to be provided to shareholders, except as it relates to notices regarding meetings of shareholders. All notices that relate to meetings of shareholders are addressed by the existing provisions of Section 85 of the ordinance. That section, Section 85, is specific to the procedure for the provision of notices to shareholders as it relates to meetings. The new amendment under Section 9 outlines the procedure to be followed for giving any other type of notice or information to shareholders. If I can move on quickly, Madam President, we have proposed an amendment to Section 18 of the ordinance. The proposed amendment under Section 18 seeks to delete the existing subsection 4 and to replace it with a new provision relating to the service of documents on a corporation. Now, this is very important. The existing subsection 4 allows for service of process of documents on the registrar in circumstances where a corporation fails to maintain a registered agent or where said registered agent cannot with reasonable diligence be found at their physical place of business. So what used to happen is that when a corporation was sued or there was a need to serve some document on that corporation and the corporation failed to maintain a registered agent on the island, or the registered agent cannot be found, then by default, the registrar was served. Now that created a tremendous burden on the registry, Madam President, because whenever documents, lawsuits, etc. were filed on the registrar then had to maintain those files at the registry. So you had storage requirements, you had other requirements that were imposed that the registry now had responsibility for the safe storage as they had become the repository, if you will, of these documents. And so the registrar has complained and said, well, this is an onerous imposition. And so we have responded to remove the requirement so that there is no longer any need to serve the registrar, and service of process in the circumstances where the registered agent of any corporation cannot be located will be effected at the last known registered office of the corporation. That is the provision. We'll have to see how it works. But that is the intention, because we could not continue the position of the registrar being the recipient of last resort, if you will, of process. And so documents now and service of process will be on the last known address. This will remove the onerous obligation on the registrar and the registry staff to accept as well as store documents in legal actions which were served on the office as agent on behalf of a corporation. Now let me be clear, I'm talking about lawsuits that have nothing to do with the registry or the registrar. Party A decides to sue Company B. Company B has not maintained a registered agent, and so the old provision was that they would serve the registrar. And the registrar then would have responsibility of storing those documents, perhaps even trying to locate the Company B. Company B may have decided that they're no longer interested in being registered here. We are saying that we are now removing that cup from the registrar, no longer their responsibility. Further to the amendment of subsection 4, we will delete the existing subsections 5, 6, 7, and 8 under section 18. Those provisions explain the procedure to be followed in the event that documents were served on the registrar. And since we are no longer permitting service on the registrar, there is no need for those provisions. And we've accordingly renumbered, Madam President, the other provisions under section 18. We move to section 24. And under that section, we have amended subsection 1, paragraph J to remove the reference to bearer shares. Again, a consistent theme throughout. And this is entirely appropriate in keeping with the other amendments to the bill that are being proposed. We've also made amendments to paragraph K and subparagraphs 1 and 2 by deleting those subparagraphs, which again make reference to bearer shares. They are no longer applicable. At section 32 of the ordinance, we've amended by deleting subsection 4 in its entirety and renumbering subsection 5 as a new subsection 4. That subsection references bearer shares and the applicable provisions of section 24, which were already proposed for amendment. Thus, the provision is no longer applicable and has been removed. We are throughout going to be engaged in some renumbering, Madam President, as we remove some sections. Section 41 was amended to remove a reference to bearer shares contained at subsection 2 thereof, and the new provision speaks only to registered shares which a corporation is authorized to issue. Subsection 3 references certificate to be issued for a bearer shareholder in accordance with the provisions under subsection 2. Having removed the reference to bearer shares, naturally, there is no longer any need for that provision. Section 48, we have amended in subsection 3 by deleting the entire subsection, which made reference to the issue of bearer shares and registered shares by a corporation. The amendment now makes it clear that a corporation is only authorized to issue shares in registered form. Subsections 9, 10, and 11 under section 48 were also deleted, as the references in those provisions to bearer shares or shares in bearer form are no longer applicable. Under the new subsection 10, the words "if a registered share" were also deleted, as this is no longer applicable, as the amendment now only allows for shares to be issued in registered form. And in the new subsection 10, paragraph C, that paragraph was deleted in its entirety, as a reference to bearer shares is no longer applicable. Section 55 was amended in subsection 2 by deleting that subsection in its entirety, as it contained references to bearer shares and therefore is no longer applicable. Section 60 of the ordinance, Madam President, was amended in subsection 2, paragraph F, by deleting the words "unless the charge is a security for bearer," as they appear in that paragraph. This amendment follows on from the other amendments which relate to the removal of references to bearer shares. Section 85 was amended in subsection 4 by deleting that subsection in its entirety. That subsection made provision for giving of notices for meetings to bearer shareholders, again, no longer applicable. Section 93 was amended in subsection 1 by deleting the reference to "and of holders of bearer shares" as they appear in that subsection, again, no longer applicable. Section 94 of the ordinance was amended, or is to be amended, I ought to say, in subsection 1 by deleting the reference to "and every holder of bearer shares" as they appear in that section, again, no longer applicable. Subsection 8 was deleted in its entirety, as it made provisions for voting in relation to bearer shares. If we're no longer going to have bearer shares, those provisions are no longer applicable. We have gone further and amended section 101, and section 101 was amended by deleting the existing heading, "Requirements for keeping books and records and register of shareholders," and replacing that heading with "Documents to be kept by the corporation." This new heading more accurately reflects the requirements under the new provisions of that section. We have deleted subsection 1 of section 101 in its entirety, as that provision contained requirements for keeping of certain documents by a corporation, and the new subsection 1 creates an itemized list of specific documents that are required to be kept by a corporation, which include, Madam President, but is not limited to, the articles of incorporation, the register of shareholders, register of directors, minutes of meetings, and notices. There's also a new requirement for the corporation to provide copies of any such documents to the corporation's registered agent, for said registered agent to maintain at its office. Why is that important? It's part of the regulatory function, Madam President, so that whenever the regulators make their site visits, for example, and go to the registered agent's office and say, "We would like to see the records for Brand Limited," that the registered agent is now being mandated to have copies of the relevant documents. In the past, what used to happen is that companies would maintain a registered agent here, but naturally all of the activities would be elsewhere, including their management in meetings. And registered agents here would simply be an office where no documentation was kept. Well, we are living in a new world, and we are responding to the changes that the regulatory environment imposes. And there is now a requirement that documents are to be kept by the corporation, but also copies to be maintained with the registered agent locally. Subsection 2 of Section 101 was deleted, as the requirements under that subsection were incorporated in new subsection 1, which speaks to the maintenance of the register of shareholders. Subsection 2 was replaced with a new provision which imposes an obligation on the corporation to notify the registered agent of any change to its register of shareholders or directors within 15 days of the date when that change was made. Again, very important for regulatory purposes. So, for the company registered here in Charlestown, with a registered agent in Charlestown, but doing its business in South Africa, having directors and shareholders all across the world, we're simply saying that when changes are made to your directors or shareholders, you have 15 days in which you must notify your local registered agent. And that, again, is our response to the new regulatory environment that exists internationally. The new provision also imposes an obligation on the corporation to provide a registered agent with written information regarding the physical address at which the original register of shareholders and directors are held. So we are saying, even though there is no requirement that the shareholders register and the register of directors is maintained here in Charlestown with the registered agent, that we are now saying that the registered agent must know where those registers are being maintained. And so if it is number 2, whatever street in Munich, in Germany, then the registered agent must know where the registers are being maintained, and that obligation is now being imposed on the company. Subsection 3 of 101 was deleted and replaced with new subsection 3. And under the new subsection, the corporation is required to give notice of any change of that physical address at which the register of shareholders and directors are kept. And again, that should be done within 15 days. So they must give notice of changes of shareholders and directors within 15 days to the registered agent. They must give notice of change of where the register of directors and shareholders are being maintained to the registered agent, and all within 14 days of any changes that are made. We have added a new subsection 5 to Section 101. This new subsection provides for the maintenance of all documents required to be kept under that section, and that they must be maintained by the registered agent for 6 years. Madam President, this is very important, that the legislation is specifically the period of time for which documents must be maintained by the registered agent. 6 years after the date on which the corporation is dissolved or otherwise ceases to exist. So if the corporation ceases to exist today, 24th August, there is now a legal statutory obligation on the registered agent to maintain the records for that corporation for a period of 6 years from today. That brings some legal certainty. It also allows the industry to understand that after that period has elapsed, they are then within their legal right to dispose of such documents. And so that period has been fixed at 6 years. This allows for information to be available to those who may require and request it, even after the corporation is no longer operating. But it is not open-ended. The period is 6 years. So if you were to come 7 years, 12 years, 20 years after a corporation has been dissolved or no longer exists, then there is no obligation on the part of the registered agent to maintain records for any period beyond this 6-year period that has been set by law. We have amended Section 102. The existing Section 102 addressed the issue of bearer shares and related provisions in that regard, in keeping with the amendments to remove all references to bearer shares, the entire Section 102 was deleted and replaced. The new heading for Section 102 is Prohibition against bearer shares. I hark back to where I started, Madam President. I sought to outline the evolution that in 1984 we had bearer shares. We later thought it best to continue with bearer shares, but to immobilize them with an authorized custodian. We have now gone to the next level now and are prohibiting bearer shares. And so when I looked at the amendments, I looked at the provisions of the bill being debated, Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023. I wondered to myself, Madam President, so what would happen to those companies that already have bearer shares? Because we're going into the House on the 24th of August to say that we will no longer allow bearer shares. So if Brand Limited already has bearer shares, what happens to them? And I'm so happy that I didn't have to call anybody because the drafters understood the assignment. And so they have now, in the new Section 102, prohibition against bearer shares, where we expressly prohibit the issuance of bearer shares by any corporation after coming into force of this ordinance. The new subsection 1 provides that a corporation shall not issue bearer shares or convert any registered shares to bearer shares or exchange any registered shares for bearer shares. Put differently, Nevis is out of the bearer share business. The new subsection 2 takes into account a specific grace period to be allowed for the conversion of existing issued, converted, or exchanged bearer shares to registered shares. And so the drafters answered my concern by saying if Brand Limited had bearer shares, then we're going to give Brand Limited a grace period to convert those bearer shares to registered shares. And that period that has been given, Madam President, is 6 months. So we've said 6 months from the coming into force of this ordinance, that is the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023, that 6 months after the date of that coming into force, those who are holding bearer shares will have an obligation to have those bearer shares converted to registered shares in compliance with Nevis law. In the event that conditions under subsection 2 are not complied with within 6-month period allowed, then the amendment provides in subsection 3 for the automatic conversion of any issued, converted, or exchanged registered bearer shares, to registered shares. This automatic conversion is only applicable after the expiration of 6 months. So how this is intended to work is that we are hopeful that the service providers are paying attention, and we will, of course, be sending out to them the new law. I'm, of course, assuming the law will get the support of the House, and we can pass it today. Now, the new law is saying that for those corporations that have bearer shares, that since Nevis is now out of the bearer share business, and we're no longer allowing bearer shares, that we are given a grace period of 6 months for those bearer shares to be converted to registered form. And we are saying that if you do not do so, then there will be an automatic conversion of those shares after that 6 months has expired. So you have 6 months within which to act, after which the law is saying that bearer shares, will be automatically converted to registered form. The drafters have gone further to say in subsection 4 that bylaws of the corporation shall be deemed to be amended from the effective date to provide that the corporation is not authorized to issue bearer shares. Subsection 5 of the new Section 102, places an obligation on the authorized custodian of bearer shares to surrender the bearer shares to the corporation within 3 months of the effective date. And so, while we are no longer going to have the custodian, authorized custodian, we are saying to those out there who had been hitherto authorized as custodians to hold bearer shares, that once we pass this legislation today, they have 3 months within which to surrender those bearer shares to the company. So again, my example of Brand Limited, that whoever the custodian of the bearer shares in Brand Limited might be, that custodian would have 3 months to surrender those bearer shares to Brand Limited. And Brand Limited, in turn, under 102, Section 102, will have an obligation within 6 months to convert those bearer shares to registered form. And if they don't do it, then the law suggests that it should be done automatically. The authorized custodian is also required to give notice of such surrender of the bearer shares to the registered agent. So, Brand Limited has authorized bearer shares out there, forgive me. The custodian holding those bearer shares has 3 months to surrender them to Brand Limited, and that custodian must also give notice to the registered agent of Brand Limited that it has surrendered the bearer shares. At the time of the surrender of the bearer shares by that custodian, the custodian shall also submit a written statement to the registered agent and the corporation providing certain information relating to the bearer shares, including the full name of the beneficial holder of the bearer shares. And one can understand the wisdom behind that, Madam President, because that is the mechanism then which allows the conversion. Because once the custodian says, I was holding 1,000 bearer shares in Brand Limited for the owner, Mark Brantley, then it allows the company to then register those shares in the name of Mark Brantley within the period allowed under the law. And so we can understand how the sections are working together harmoniously to usher in this new era of no bearer shares being permitted in Nevis. The new subsection 7 provides for the retention of records containing bearer share information by the registered agent for a period of 5 years from the effective date of the amendment to the ordinance. The new subsection 8 imposes a penalty of up to $10,000 for contravention of the provisions of subsections 5 and 6 of section 102. And that's important, that, again, registered agents, service providers, that they are in touch with their clients, they're informing their clients what is happening, and they alert their clients of the penalties that can accrue. I want to make it clear, Madam President, that the government is not in the business of penalizing people. We're in the business of doing business. And we would much prefer for our service providers and those corporations registered here, those entities registered here, to remain in compliance with the law. Sometimes the service providers complain and say that the fines and the penalties are too onerous. And my response to them is, there's actually no fine and no penalty if you do what you're supposed to do. They only become applicable when people fail to comply with the law. And so the penalty of up to $10,000 is a significant penalty, but it is entirely avoidable if the service providers and the companies simply conform with the requirements according to law. We have, lastly, amended Section 142 of the Principal Ordinance by deleting that section in its entirety and replacing it with new provisions. Under the existing provision, the applicable penalty was a general penalty for contravention of one or more of the provisions of the ordinance for which no specific penalty is applicable. This allowed for the imposition of a fine of up to a maximum of $10,000. The section is now being amended, Madam President, to include subsection 1, which imposes a penalty of up to 10,000 on a corporation found in contravention of any of the provisions for which no specific penalty is applicable. A new subsection 2 was also included to impose a penalty of up to $10,000 on an individual found in contravention of any other provision of the ordinance for which no specific penalty is applicable. The amendment under Section 142 seeks to make distinction between the applicable penalties for a corporation and an individual found in contravention of the ordinance. So basically, we are seeking to specify who is subject to that penalty. Madam President, I have sought to go through the explanatory memorandum, by pointing out how the various sections of the principal ordinance will be impacted by the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023. And I hope that by taking the approach that I've taken, the House and the public has an appreciation of what it is we are seeking to do by this new legislation, to modernize, to assist in tightening up our regulatory environment, to finally outlaw bearer shares, and to ensure that through our electronic signature and electronic filing, that we provide greater clarity and greater ease of doing business for the island of Nevis. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize the member for Nevis 1. Your indulgence, please. Thank you. Member, you may proceed.
Madam President, I rise to support the introduction into law of the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023. And, Madam President, to focus on a few areas of the proposed amendments. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Madam President, has explained in detail the effect and purpose of the amendments. And I wish, Madam, to lend my voice in support because I am persuaded that these amendments will be effective to bring Nevis into the inner circle of international finance centers within the region. It is, Madam President, imperative for Nevis to keep stride with the giants of the sector while remaining flexible and well-regulated so that we can continue to attract new businesses while still retaining our favorable rating from the international regulators. Madam President, the removal of bearer shares from our legislation, in my mind, is an important step for Nevis, helping us to avoid international criticism that tends to associate bearer shares with a lack of transparency. That is now a critical hallmark of well-regulated international financial centers. The bill not only removed the possibility, Madam President, of issuing bearer shares, but also ensures that the bearer shares are converted to registered shares so that the legitimate interests of previous holders of bearer shares remain protected. And I believe, Madam President, that that is critical for the transparency of the industry here on the island of Nevis. The amendment also sought, Madam President, to move with the international times, keep in step with the international trends and modern technological development. The bill also provides for the acceptance, Madam President, of electronic signatures, which I think is very important, on documents to be filed with the corporate registry. You have heard, Madam President, from the Premier that this development will facilitate the ease of doing business at the registry. And I have no doubt that the registry staff will welcome the relief from manually signing voluminous bundles of documents on a daily basis. I believe that they will be happy, Madam President, for the electronic signature. This, no doubt, will be a very attractive feature of our legislation as we seek to market and promote Nevis in the markets where service providers are eagerly looking for new options for their clients. Madam President, on the issue of electronic filing, which I feel is extremely important, Madam President, and a step in the right direction, because as simple as it is one step in the protection of our environment. It means, Madam President, less paper, a lot less paper. And I am happy, Madam President, that we are now seeing electronic filing. Madam President, I believe that Nevis has a golden opportunity to take advantage of developments elsewhere. And I commend the Minister of Finance and his team at the Financial Services Regulatory and Supervisory Department on their prompt response to the probing inquiries of potential new entities wishing to offer services from Nevis as a regulated license providers. Madam President, the growth and development of the Nevis financial sector will come not a moment too soon, as Nevis seeks to grow other sectors of our economy in the face of the knock-on effects of COVID and the contraction in the global economy. The development of Nevis will benefit greatly from our breathtaking, Madam President, the development of Nevis will benefit greatly from our breathing new life into our financial services sector. And the Minister of Finance, Madam President, outlined a number of areas, generate new revenue. He indicated, Madam President, that at this point over 2022, we are already up to some 14%, Madam President. I'm hoping, Madam President, that we will continue to see additional rental income of properties here on the island of Nevis. We know, Madam President, that with the expansion of the financial services sector, many property owners constructed many apartment buildings. We want to see, Madam President, that those apartment buildings once again be filled and running over. Jobs, Madam President. We are hoping that we will once again see an expansion of jobs in the financial services sector, thus increasing additional activities here on the island of Nevis, Madam President. Madam President, with those very few words, I am indeed pleased and proud to support this bill. And I wish these amendments, Madam President, safe passage through this Honourable House. Thank you. May it please you.
Are there any other contributions? I recognize the member for Nevis 5.
Madam President, honorable members, Clerk of the House, Sergeant of the Arms, media personnel, ladies and gentlemen in the public gallery, Nevisians at home and abroad, I bid you a pleasant good morning. I rise on this occasion to make my contribution to the debate in this honorable House on the passing of the new President. Madam President, I wish to state for the record that I really have no issues with the proposed amendments. Indeed, I am quite happy that the government has taken this initiative to really put in place these amendments, as I believe they can only advance our financial service industry and therefore create a greater avenue for us to do business or create that environment for ease of business that we so need here in Nevis. So, Madam President, I commend the initiative. Madam President, having said that, I wish to also state that all members of this House, and perhaps yourself too, Madam President, we do recognize that there is a need for us to diversify our economy, particularly so after the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic. Madam President, I say this, and it is indeed evident because of the purpose why we're here today. We continue in our efforts, and I say we because it requires and takes maturity as well as a collective effort. Madam President, I believe that the amendments that were brought forward today, particularly those pertaining to bearer shares, would have come from numerous, I would say, complaints, perhaps for lack of a better word, by stakeholders in the financial industry, because, Madam President, having worked in that particular industry myself, I am quite aware of the problems that bearer shares pose to us here in Nevis, particularly when we make attempts to form new correspondent banking relationships with international banks. So I do believe that this initiative, the successful passing of this bill, if that is so, Madam President, it would really help to build confidence in the international stakeholders and partners doing business with us here in Nevis, particularly in the banking industry. Madam President, I wish to focus on one point, and it is a point that is relevant to the debate because it deals with revenue, but I do believe, and perhaps my colleagues share the same sentiments, that a growth model centered on tourism is simply obsolete. This assessment has been confirmed time and time again, and perhaps more so after our experiences with COVID. Madam President, I think the time has come for us to focus on further developing, let me not say developing, further developing our small business sector, thereby creating an economy that is based on service. And when I say service, Madam President, it goes beyond tourism or beyond customer service. Service in the sense that we can have business partnerships that is dependent on interrelated trade with domestic businesses. Madam President, to put it simple, it is the focus of small businesses supporting other small businesses. Madam President, we do have that here on the shores in St. Kitts and Nevis. But my objective and my argument is that this needs greater effort and greater attention. You see, Madam President, this is a means of economic diversification. For far too long, we have been dependent on international commodities, exchanging our service, depending on international markets, depending on people from outside in order to grow our economy. Madam President, the time has come for us, in addition to those activities, to realize that we have to be self-sustainable. It is the only way forward for us in small developing countries like St. Kitts and Nevis. It is the only way forward for us to move forward, for us to be able to have a strong economy based on service as well as people interacting and trusting each other. Madam President, over the past 50 years, we have seen a lot in terms of international and scientific development. Madam President, perhaps 50 years ago, no one in this room could have imagined the prospects of having an electronic vehicle. Madam President, that initiative that we see today, perhaps not here in Nevis as yet, but in other parts of the world, it came from an idea. Perhaps an idea that was planted, who knows, maybe 20 years ago. The fact is, Madam President, in order for us to have development and sustainable economic development, we have to start putting our ideas and ensuring that we put the necessary strategies in place so that they may become fruitful. Madam President, a sustainable and strong economy can only prove beneficial to our country. It touches all facets of our lives. It touches on health, education, economic well-being, independence. Madam President, we have started and we continue to grow. That's why we are here today. But I must say, Madam President, to yourself and the honorable members that greater effort is needed. We must build what is coined as an orange economy, a creative economy, however you wish to describe it. The fact of the matter is that we have to invest and invest wholeheartedly in our small businesses. Let us start local. This is not a criticism, Madam President, because I am fully aware that of several initiatives that have been taken presently in order to do this. I am simply suggesting to the honorable members that it must be our #1 priority because it will seek to supplement our efforts in the financial services industry, as well as the tourism industry and the real estate or construction industry. Madam President, I do believe that if we create an environment where trade and service activities of small businesses can make a significant impact in our efforts to build a sustainable economy, we have to work together collectively, both government and all stakeholders, including the opposition, to put a model in place that will not only diversify the economy, but create substantial economic wealth. Our people need this. For far too long, Madam President, our small businesses have been struggling. And despite our best efforts in terms of stimulating the economy, giving grants, it appears that to some extent that our small businesses continue to suffer. As such, Madam President, perhaps the time has come for a holistic approach to be taken to this particular industry. Perhaps, Madam President, the time has come for us to create a strategic model that will create that type of environment where small businesses can thrive, where they can prosper. We have to look at the challenges facing our small businesses. Madam President, being out on the streets, talking to people, socializing, one of the biggest factors facing small businesses perhaps is the dependence on importation of goods. And of course, with that, Madam President, we know there is a cost attached to that, because in addition to having to purchase goods outside of the shores of St. Kitts and Nevis, there is also the cost attached to importation, customs duties, VAT, what have you, numerous taxes. Madam President, I believe, and I do hope that the honorable members of this House would agree, that with collective effort, we would be able to come up or design a plan that would put strategic focus on creating domestic-based trade by using small businesses as the avenue to generate revenue.
Honourable Member, just remember that the presentation is confined to what is relevant to this bill and not at large. So you were making a point earlier in relation to diversification. If it is, remember to keep your presentation confined to what is relevant and not go too much outside of what that would require.
Thank you, Madam President. I am indeed grateful for your comments, Madam President. And I do take it. I was of the view, Madam President, that as we are dealing with amendments to revenue-generated bill, that the effort to seek other means that will complement revenue-generated bills and to promote the initiative of bringing more economic diversification to the shores of Nevis, that it is indeed relevant, Madam President. Madam President, I must say that the approach that I am proposing will take strategic planning, it will take consultation with all stakeholders, it will take time, effort, work, but I do believe that it will be beneficial to all of us. Because you see, Madam President, we cannot continue to put strain on our tourism industry and our financial services industry, or even our agriculture sector. We have to find a way through economic diversification to have several small sectors that are growing strong. Strong in the sense that it can generate new revenue to the treasury of Nevis, and by extension, St. Kitts, Madam President. So, having said that, I do believe and I do hope that the members, both opposite as well as those on the opposition, can agree that we must look at our economy. We must focus on economic diversification with all of our efforts, with all of our heart and our soul. Because, Madam President, the people of Nevis deserve it. The people of Nevis have been crying for this, and I believe that the time has come for us to really deliver this particular initiative to the people of Nevis. Madam President, I wish to speak very quickly on another initiative that we perhaps can explore, and that is human development. As I listened to the member for number 2 in his presentation, in justifying the proposed amendments, I believe that all of us can agree that it takes commitment, it takes human input. And as I just glance at Madam Legal Advisor, I wish to take some time out to commend you and to commend your team for taking this initiative in ensuring that specific attention is paid to our financial services industry that will create greater transparency and build confidence in that particular industry. And I say this perhaps without any water in my mouth, Madam President, and cautiously, because there are times, because of our political environment and the way that we are cultured, where people sometimes feel if you give accolades to the government, that there is something wrong with that. Madam President, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day, if the government does what it is supposed to do, all of us as Nevisians benefit. So I just wish to say that for the record, Madam President. Now, back to human development, Madam President. I believe that we have sufficient intellect, talents here on our shores in St. Kitts and Nevis, where we can tap into that as an avenue for economic diversification. Madam President, sometimes our human resource is overlooked. Sometimes we feel the need to look beyond our shores for expertise, for talents. But Madam President, I believe that if we invest in our human development, that too can be an avenue that can bring advantage towards diversifying our economy and fostering further economic development here on the shores of St. Kitts and Nevis. Madam President, our social market economy, if we were to focus on that, it will open the gates for opportunities. It will enable us to reward performance, but also guarantee protection of big risks. For example, Madam President, we are reliant on our people to invest in property, housing, land, businesses. But a lot of time, we take that investment for granted. Madam President, if we had a society where our people, human development, if they were afraid to take risks, if they had no ambition to invest in property, houses, lands, what have you, businesses, then, Madam President, can you imagine what a dull and gloomy economy we would have? Madam President, the banks, the financial sector would suffer tremendously. So we must, Madam President, applaud our people. We must thank them for, despite the economic downturn that we are facing due to COVID-19 and other factors, Madam President, global factors, some beyond our control, our people continue, through their own, perhaps personal ambitions, continue to invest in themselves. Madam President, honorable members, we have a duty collectively to help them to invest in themselves in whatever way possible, whether it is through means of education, whether it is through, as I mentioned before, small business initiative. We must start to invest wholeheartedly in our human capital. The same way, Madam President, that we invest in them for political capital. Madam President, having said that, I wish to say that the spirit of my presentation here this morning is not really to be critical, but it is more so to evoke and to motivate us as parliamentarians, as lawmakers, as leaders, to understand the importance of diversifying our economy. Having said that, Madam President, I wish to thank you for lending your ears, as well as the members opposite. I am indeed grateful, and that is the extent of my presentation. However, Madam President, I do reserve to speak briefly on the adjournment, if I am so permitted.
Thank you. I recognize the member for Nevis 4.
Madam President, good morning to you and to the members present, also to those in the gallery and those viewing and listening, whether here at home in Nevis or in the diaspora. I rise to make a contribution to the bill entitled Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023. Allow me, Madam President, before I make my contribution, to extend sympathies to the Roach family and to a dear friend of mine who passed just earlier this morning or late last night. His name is Donald, and I extend sympathies to his family over there in the Newcastle area. Madam President, the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023 supports the financial services sector, which is a significant part of our economy, started back in 1984. Primarily, Madam President, the amendments proposed, although a bit late, are non-controversial because we are operating in a changing world, and change requires change. And so, as we look at the advances in technology, we would want to ensure that one of the major financial sectors in Nevis remains compliant with local, regional, and international standards. I seek clarification, Madam Chair, regarding the amendment to Section 101, where it indicates that it's amendment to Section 101C(a), where it says, within 15 days of any change in the register, notify the registered agent in writing of the change. I compare that, Madam President, with D3, where it says, where the place at which the original register of shareholders or register of directors is changed, the corporation shall provide the registered agent with the physical address of the new location of the records within 14 days. And so, Madam President, I would just want to ensure that that is the intent of the amendment, and if not, the need for consistency, I think, would be quite beneficial to those who would be benefiting from the amendments proposed here today. In a similar vein, Madam President, amendment of section 102, where it speaks to amendments to section 102, number 7, where it says a registered agent shall retain the records containing bearer shares information for a period of 5 years from the effective date. Compare that, Madam President, to, and I apologize to going back to the amendment of section 101E, which speaks to any information and records required to be kept and maintained at the office of the registered agent under this section shall be maintained for a minimum of 6 years. So in one section, it speaks to 5 years retaining records, and in another section, it speaks to 6 years. And so I am hopeful, Madam President, that those minor errors can be corrected, if that is the intention, so that the proposed amendment would be consistent throughout. Madam President, as we understand the intent of the proposed legislation, which is to help to make the ease of doing business much easier and aligned with the current standards and requirements, I would say that this is definitely timely, because as we look at the World Bank ease of doing business scale, we would see that St. Kitts and Nevis ranks 139 out of 190. And in fact, if we look at the region, Madam President, coming into the technological era, we can see that ranking at 139, in the Caribbean, we are behind places such as Puerto Rico, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, Antigua, Dominican Republic, Barbados, St. Vincent and Grenadines. And so while we are making the effort now to improve the ease of doing business with us, we do have some catching up to do if we intend to be as competitive as we can be in the region. Madam President, as I said, we're living in a global community, and not only do we have to look at what is going on around us, we must also recognize what the international standards are, and we must also recognize where we fit in the global picture. And so, Madam President, if we look at the United Nations e-government development database, which provides a tool that does an assessment of the e-government development of UN member states, we would recognize that as far as the e-government readiness goes, we would see that St. Kitts and Nevis is ranked at 67% in terms of development. And that is indeed quite good compared to some of the other islands. That database, Madam President, looks at services, telecommunication infrastructure, and human resources. It's the necessary training for our youths. We understand that the readiness is weakest, I think one of the things that can be done is to ensure, in alignment with Sustainable Development Goal 10, to reduce inequalities, we should ensure that each person has the same access to whatever is being presented or proposed. And when we look at reduced inequalities, Madam President, it is interesting to note that you can have different standards or different means of responding to the same request. And so if we move to streamline and administer our programs in the same way, then I think overall the intent of this legislation would be well received. We cannot have inequalities in terms of the relationship between government and businesses. All businesses should feel that they're being treated fairly. All citizens should feel that they're being treated fairly. And so, in some instances, you may hear that a different approach is taken. Madam President, the need for the standardization of services is critical, because you cannot have a situation where you have the regulation in place, but John Doe can call a minister at 2 o'clock in the morning and get a response, and Jane Doe would be told, don't call back my phone. We must have not just the regulation or the legal part of it, we must also have the good relationships between the government and those who are being impacted. And Madam President, this is simply in the line of understanding that once we are amending a piece of legislation to enhance and to improve the businesses that we're doing here, then my contribution is that there are ways that we can improve overall. And so that is why I am making reference to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so, Madam President, I would just speak to the last Sustainable Development Goal. And if you were looking or listening, I would have spoken about SDG 8, 9, 10. They're all in order because they're all within that region. And so I'm just going to speak about Sustainable Development Goal 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. Because, Madam President, the financial services is supported by the legislation. And if we were to really try to develop Nevis as a sustainable city with sustainable communities, we would want to move towards providing new legislation that deals with the current times. And so while it is good that we can have amendments to legislation that has been on the books for decades, Madam President, it is just as necessary that while we are trying to develop Nevis and the country in these changing times, that we operate within a framework that will help us to do so. And Madam President, when we look at the financial services sector, which has been around for some time, we are now living in the era of pandemics and climate change, and the need, Madam President, as we develop our country, we must ensure that we build as much resilience as we can to external factors. And so while we are making this advance with regards to the technological advances, we must recognize, Madam President, that if we continue to rely on fossil fuels, then our internet would not work. We must recognize, Madam President, that if the cost of food continues to be high, there would be little social space for people to operate. And so, Madam President, I would say to you that as we look at strengthening the legislation that helps financial services and other businesses that in terms of really advancing Nevis and making it much easier for the island as a whole to develop, that we look at other legislation that would indeed look at the blue economy, the green economy, and the orange economy. And so, Madam President, while I would have said the bill is a non-controversial one, it's a bit late in coming, we do recognize, Madam President, that the approach that we have seen with regards to amendments after amendments after amendments, and we understand sometimes to deal with the changing world and the changing requirements and standards, we do feel, Madam President, that in this 21st century, where we see most of the islands diversifying their economies, Madam President, we do recognize that there is a need for new and improved legislation that can only help this legislation that is being proposed today to be more effective and more impactful. With those few words, Madam President, thank you very much.
Thank you. I recognize the member for Nevis too.
Madam President, I rise to hopefully conclude the debate on this, the second reading of the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023. And to end the debate in relation to this particular bill, I am grateful that the opposition has in large measure supported, and I'm grateful for the support that has come from the Honourable Member for Nevis 1 on this bill. I don't think that the bill is controversial. I think the bill takes us forward in a significant way. And whilst I understood the desire, if you will, of the members opposite to expand the debate well beyond the parameters of the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2021, I think that the comments that were made were useful in most part, perhaps a precursor to the budget debates that we hope will come at the end of this year. I wanted, however, to address two things quickly. The Honourable Member for Nevis 4 made reference to some anomalies within the sections. I think she made reference to, the Honourable Member that is, made reference to the amendment, proposed amendment to Section 102, and indicated at subsection 7 thereof that a registered agent shall retain the records containing bearer share information for a period of 5 years, and contrasted that to the provisions of Section 101, where it provided, let's see if I have that right, at Section 1, well, the amendment to Section 101, which is contained in Section 16. Section 16E, that information records required to be kept and maintained at the office of the registered agent under the section shall be maintained for a minimum of 6 years after the date on which the corporation is dissolved or otherwise ceases to exist. I just want to point out that these are two entirely different provisions dealing with information of a different kind and different color. The one deals only with information as to bearer shares. Bearing in mind, Madam President, that we are seeking to phase out bearer shares entirely. In fact, I think it is quite generous that we are required to maintain information bearer shares for 5 years. In fact, my colleague from number 1 whispered to me it probably should be less. But it is, that section is restricted only to information as it relates to bearer shares. Section 101, on the other hand, speaks to information to be retained by the registered agent more broadly, more generally. And so I think that the two sections are not incompatible at all. They deal with different types of information and are therefore quite properly within the provisions of the legislation that we are proposing. The reference was also made to the difference of where the place where the register of shareholders or register of directors, where that is changed, that a notification must come within 14 days of the change of location, as opposed to 15 days that is stated elsewhere, where there's any change to the register. And we feel that, based on what the legal advisor is suggesting, is a mere typo, which we hope we can amend when we get to the committee stage. So I just wanted to clarify those two things, that there is no inconsistency, really. It is just, on one hand, a typo, and on the other, we're dealing with two different types of information. And so the 5-year period for the bearer shares information and the 6-year period for all other information is completely appropriate. My honourable members opposite in this House, I think both the member for Nevis 5 and the member for Nevis 4, they spoke at length about diversifying the economy. And I said, while I think much of their presentation went well beyond the scope of why we're here today, and the discussion about the SDGs and what SDGs we may be seeking to achieve, etc., well beyond what we are here to discuss. But I would just want, for the benefit of the public, to understand, Madam President, that this government, I believe more than any other government, has emphasized a diversification of the local economy. And I'm not sure whether the members opposite have been paying attention or been paying sufficient attention. But we have been on a path of diversification now and have accelerated our rate of diversification since COVID. We have talked, for example, about what we're doing in agriculture, in food security, in the jobs and the economic advancement that can come from feeding ourselves. All across Nevis, we're seeing shade house technology being deployed, more crops being grown, more local produce. This government has invested in the Lawrencetown Parish storage facility. Why? In order to ensure that there's a longer shelf life for produce. Because we're saying if we encourage farmers to produce more, and they respond positively to that encouragement, then we as a government must also have adequate storage for them. So we're seeing not an ad hoc approach, but an orderly and well thought out approach to that sector of the economy, to ensure that in feeding ourselves, we create jobs and we diversify away from the heavy dependence that we've had on tourism. We have talked about the energy sector and the strides that we are seeking to make in bringing renewable energy to the fore. And I've set out at every step of the way the steps that have been taken so far and the steps that need to be taken in the context of, say, our geothermal energy thrust. We recognize that if we can bring geothermal energy to market, it will be transformative and might actually replace tourism as the principal industry driving our local economy. The greening of our economy, the ability to have green transportation, electric cars, I believe that was mentioned by the member for number 5, electric buses, electric scooters. That even as we're here in this August assembly, that all the lights and the AC and all of that will be powered by renewable energy. We have outlined those plans. We're not there yet. But we believe we took a giant leap forward when the Caribbean Development Bank approved some US $18 million for this project just last December. And we have been working on that project. We have been saying these things. We started in the height of COVID, a movie industry here on Nevis. It was criticized, it was poo-pooed, there was a lot said. But at the end of the day, 9 movies were produced in St. Kitts and Nevis started here as an initiative by the Nevis Island Administration. And we, in the process, were able to expose quite a large number of our local people to the ins and outs and intricacies of the movie industry. To the point now, Madam President, where we can speak with confidence to other movie producers and producers of film to come to Nevis and to see Nevis as a viable option for their film industry. So I hear about the orange economy. I hear about the creative economy. But we have actually taken tangible steps to embark on that. We have boosted our staff to interact with those who want to come in to deal with film production. And we're not just looking at movies, we're looking at commercials, we're looking at photo shoots. All of this has been outlined repeatedly and has been happening here on this island of Nevis, under this administration. We have, Madam President, as we go back to food security, talked about a poultry industry. We have not just talked about it, you know. We have gone ahead and we've bought the equipment for the processing of the birds. That is already in hand and paid for. We are finalizing plans now to start the construction of the facility where the birds will be processed. We have had one meeting thus far, and I'm told other meetings to come with those interested. And I believe at the first meeting we had over 50 persons who came forward. Small entrepreneurs, people who are saying they're interested in getting into that industry. And the model that we want to use is to have entrepreneurs growing the birds, and then those small farmers bringing the birds to the government facility for processing, so that we can control quality and ensure that what goes out to the supermarkets, what goes out to the restaurants, is quality produce coming from a central facility which is government run and controlled. All of these things are being talked about, discussed. In terms of, so we have done all this and more. My colleague was whispering to me, because sometimes at my age now I forget things. And he reminded me in terms of developing our human resource. We're now teaching Mandarin in our schools here in Nevis. In fact, there's a graduation that's happening, I think perhaps it's next week, where these students are taking Mandarin as an official second language. They're doing the test. That was an innovation. Why? We're trying to better prepare our people for this new global environment. All of these are things that have been happening on this island. The Honourable Member for number 5 spoke at length about small business. And she made some interesting points, but I think it is important, Madam President, for me to say this, because too many of our people have somehow been persuaded that it is the responsibility of the government to make sure that their small business succeeds. I don't mean any offense when I say so, but we hear this constant talk about small business, small business, small business. And I engage with small business people all across this island. And I engage, and I'll give you an example. I engage with a small business owner. And that small business owner, as far as I know, has been in operation now for more than 40 years. 40. They've been selling one product for 40 years. They've been selling that one product on the weekends for 40 years. As far as I'm aware, they don't employ one person except themselves for 40 years. They have had the one location for 40 years. And they came to me and said, the government is not doing enough for small business. I said, well, what can we do? So we should get free electricity and free water. Because you all give concessions to Four Seasons, but you're not giving me any concessions. And I said, yes, that might be true. But Four Seasons employs 700 people. In 40 years, you're selling one product, one location, no employees. And I want to say that because too many of our people have been persuaded, and sometimes we ourselves as the politicians and the political rhetoric, that it is the government's responsibility to make sure that they survive. So if you happen to have a bad idea, Madam President, and we all have bad ideas from time to time, if you happen to jump into a business that is not suited for you, you know you don't like people where you shouldn't be in anything that requires you to deal with customer service. Because when people come around, you get vexed with them quick. It requires patience, it requires engagement, it requires sometimes you as a business person taking the wrong even when you're not wrong. But some of us are not suited to that. We're suited to other things. We see a man up the road selling barbecue chicken. He looked like he got a good crowd. We say, boy, we're going to buy a grill and we're going to sell the same barbecue chicken. And we need to say these things because they are true. No government anywhere in the world can guarantee the success of every small business. Businesses come, they go. They start, they fail. I read something that I don't even know if it's true. But if it's not true, forgive me. That the man who they say invent Kentucky Fried Chicken, they said he had failure after failure until finally he got KFC, which was a success. Some people try and try and try until they finally find a formula that works. But I think when we speak as leaders, and in this parliament, we have persons who are in a leadership position, whether you're in opposition or government. People have voted for you, you're here. We need to talk to our people in a way that our people understand the realities of life. While the member for number 5 was speaking, I went online and I found something from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States. And they published a report in 2021. You know what the report said, Madam President? 20% of all small businesses started in the great United States of America fail within the first year. 20%, that's 1 in 5. By the time you get to the second year, 30% would have failed. And by the time you get to 5 years, 50% would have failed. By the time you get to 10 years, 70% would have failed. I am saying that because I think it's important that our people understand that sometimes it is not policy, it is not that the government isn't doing enough or the government isn't giving you enough. It is the business model. It is the product. Because a lot of us have an idea and we think it's the best idea and we therefore say, let us go. You know, Madam President, I don't know if you like me, but when I'm trying to relax, I watch TV. And there's something called Shark Tank. You all watch Shark Tank? Yeah. And everybody comes to Shark Tank thinking they have the best idea. And by the time the sharks are done with them, I'm sure some of them go home and cry. Because the shark said, no, what you're saying don't make no sense. I am not going to finance this because it can't succeed. And I think that is the kind of discussion. And not that I'm being harsh. But every time a business closes its door in Charlestown, somebody's going to take to social media and say, the government. Lord, this bad government, another business shut down. They're not going to say the business bad enough. They're not going to say the chicken too hard or the chicken not seasoned properly. They say the government. And I think we need to be real with our people. The government can do only so much in creating the environment. Thereafter is where you need innovation. You need ideas, you need training, you need people. Some people just jump into something, I ask them sometimes, so when you buy the truck and the work that you anticipate doesn't come the way how are you going to maintain the truck and pay the bank and all of that? Then nobody to think about that. And if the truck park up for a week because there's no work, it's how to cost the government. You know, a fella told me the other day, Madam President, he said, I had a trucking business and my business not doing well, and I blame you. I said, why you blame me? He said, you went on radio and said that the government is encouraging small businesses and encouraging people to invest. And so I went and buy a truck, and now my truck isn't doing well. And I blame you for encouraging me to invest. So I said, but you didn't do your research? You didn't have a plan, business plan? You didn't know how you're going to sustain the truck? He tell me diesel killing him, he can't afford diesel. So you didn't know the truck need diesel to run? But the truck run on air? Sometimes we need to have these conversations with our people because too many of our people are misled to a view that the government's role is to guarantee the success of their business, and that cannot exist anywhere. There's some who don't want to pay, whether it is the nominal taxes that are being charged, they don't want to pay Social Security, they want to pay Social Services levy. And then they come to the government, you must waive this, you must waive that, and you must waive everything because that is the government's responsibility to make sure that I succeed. And we're saying that it cannot be. It is the government's responsibility to create an environment where people can succeed. But that does not replace the need for people to be innovative and for people to have proper plans when they seek to invest and to get into something. Because a man up the road selling barbecue chicken and you see you have a crowd on a Saturday does not mean that that's the business for you. And if you even go into the barbecue chicken business, maybe you should add a piece of bread, a garlic bread or 2 Johnny cake with it. But if you go sell the same barbecue, you know what is likely to happen? Where that one businessman was getting 6 people to come, 3 men now go to here and 3 come to you. See, both of you. All you do is take some business from him and makes his business less viable. So I think that we need to talk in a constructive way with our people about this and move away from this notion, because when I looked at the statistics from the great United States, the biggest, wealthiest, most powerful country the world has ever known, and I say, what? By 5 years, 50% of new businesses fail in America. The great America, 300 plus million people. And when one business closes doing Nevis, they start to cost the government, says the government fault. I think we need to look at that. The other issue is that I hear the reflection often, and I think the member for number 5 didn't get into it, but she alluded to it in passing, about the cost of goods. And I agree. There's little that we can do to control the cost of goods. And if our business is based, as it is, because we have an open-ended economy, if it's based on importing goods, sometimes even the raw products we need for certain things that we have to import, then I can understand the concern. But a lot of that is simply beyond the control of us as a small government. And the substitutes for imported goods are not always obvious, because something depends on the industry you're going into, depends on the business you're going into. You have to import. If you decide that you want to sell clothes, for example, you want to sell shoes, if they're not being produced locally, then you have to import. What happens to those businesses that are based on an import model? They then come to the government and say, you should give us duty-free, VAT-free, and everything free at the port. And it sounds good, you know, because if you remove all imports at the port, then the argument is that we can bring in things, it will be more affordable, and then we can sell more, and we make money, and everybody lives happily ever after. The only one problem with that, the same person will then call me up and say, boss, I need the road up by me fixing up. And water needs to come up by me, and electricity needs to come up by me. And oh, by the way, I went up by the hospital last week, and this machine up at the hospital isn't working. I need our people to start to understand that the country works in a particular way. And every time you say to the government, don't charge me here, don't collect any tax from me there, it impacts the ability of the government to deliver the services that the government is called upon to deliver. And we ought not to lose sight of that, Madam President. Everybody in Nevis knows the approach is everything must be free. We want everything to be free. I don't want to pay for water. I don't want to pay for electricity. I don't want to pay no duty. I don't want to pay no VAT. I don't want to pay anything. But I want my road fixed. And if Mr. Brand, the good member for number 1, dear turns off the water, oh, it's wailing and gnashing of teeth in Nevis. We can't have it both ways. And I know the tax revenue authorities had a beautiful thing that they were doing. A couple of years ago, they said, be a responsible taxpayer. I like the tone of that. Be a responsible citizen. They want our people to be responsible. But I'm saying in this house that we, the leaders and the politicians, also have a responsibility to have these conversations, real conversations about how the world works with our people. And to stop this sense that we sometimes engender in them, that somehow we are, and government is responsible for every choice that they make, for every consequence of every choice that they make, that the government is responsible. I know when we talk like this, sometimes it is unpopular. They say, it's how you lose support. You tell people that they must take responsibility. But we cannot continue to exist as a society, Madam President, unless our people are willing to take responsibility. They must understand the decision that they take, decision to invest, decision to buy or not to buy. You know and I know, and we all in this house know, sometimes people, my mother of blessed memory used to tell me, don't hang my hat where I can't reach it. All of us had that grandmother, that mother, that auntie, somebody who used to tell us, save a little penny for a rainy day. Don't hang your hat where you can't reach it. Meaning, don't overextend yourself. And our people have lost that because now our people are overextend themselves and somebody out there is telling them, oh, you can't pay Nevlec, at the government fault. You not tell them you should not have gone to the fete last week and go VIP. You tell them, oh, you can't pay Nevlec, at the government fault. We need to have these conversations with our people, unpopular and difficult as they are, because they're important conversations to have, and we must not lose sight of those lessons. The honourable members opposite took off on a track, and I look like I followed them, so let me stop. And just to say, Madam President, that I feel that this bill is timely, the bill is necessary. There has been really no opposition to it because I think all the members recognize that it is necessary for us to make the amendments and improvements that we are now seeking to make. I hear the criticism that the bill is a little late. I'll accept that. But as we say, better late than never. It is here now, and we hope to have full and unanimous support going forward. May it please you, Madam President.
Thank you for your contribution, members. The question is that the bill, shortly entitled the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023, be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Business Corporation Ordinance, Cap 7.01, and for matters related thereto and connected herewith.
The bill, shortly entitled the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023, has been read a second time. The House will now move to committee stage.
Section 18.
The question is that Clause 18 stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 17.
Members, may I make a suggestion so somebody can put the, make a motion if necessary? Clause 17, in what would be the new section 102, subsection 5, the second line, within 3 months of the effective date, we'd have to insert that. Date, the word date. Yes. If that is acceptable, the question then is that clause 17 as amended stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 16.
Clause 16, the subsection G. 16, that will be 16. Subsection D, where it speaks to D3. It should say 15 days instead of 14 days, just for consistency. That's for the physical address of the new records.
The question is that clause 16 as amended stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 15.
The question is that clause 15 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 14.
The question is that clause 14 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 13.
So we have the thing for that. There's a new draft. Yeah, but the bill that is before the house, so we have that. So what's the track change? Where are we, section? 13. Okay, so we should change that, Madam President. Section 85 of the principal ordinance amended by deleting subsection 4 in its entirety and renumbering the following subsections 5 bracket and 6 bracket as 4 bracket and 5 bracket. Yeah, 13.
Thank you, Honourable Member. If you could just read that one more
So
time,
section, it should now read, section 85 of the principal ordinance is amended by deleting subsection 4 in its entirety and renumbering the following subsections 5 in brackets and 6 in brackets as 4 in brackets and 5 in brackets.
Grateful. The question is that clause 13 as amended stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 12.
The question is that clause 12 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 11.
The question is that clause 11 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 10.
The question is that clause 10 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 9.
The question is that clause 9 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Madam, Yeah, there's just an amendment there, so a typo. 9, it says that A in subsection 2 by deleting, it should be deleted. The T is missing.
Grateful. The question is that clause 9 as amended stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 8.
The question is that clause 8 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 7.
The question is that clause 7 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 6.
The question is that clause 6 stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? Clause 6.
No objection.
Clause,
The ayes have it.
clause 5.
The question is that clause 5 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Hold a second. Yeah, clause 4. Go ahead.
The question is that clause 4 stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 3.
The question is that clause 3 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
The question is that clause 2 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 1.
The question is that clause 1 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Enacting clause.
The question is that the enacting clause forms part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Title.
The question is that the title forms part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Thank you, Honourable members. The House would now resume its sitting.
Madam President, I'm proud to report that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023 has come through the committee stage with some minor amendments. I would, in the circumstances, ask that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Madam President, I wish to second that.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Business Corporation Amendment Bill 2023 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Business Corporation Ordinance Cap 7.01 and for matters related thereto and connected herewith.
The bill has been read a third time and passed. Continue.
Madam President, I rise to commence the debate on the second reading of the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Limited Liability Company Amendment Bill 2023. Madam President, the bill under consideration provides for some amendments to the Nevis Limited Liability Company Ordinance cap 7.04. Most of the amendments are being proposed based on changes in the general industry standards regionally and internationally, and the need for the industry here in Nevis to remain updated as well as to remain competitive. We're also, of course, paying attention to the regulatory environment and ensuring that Nevis remains within compliance at all times. We have, just as we did in the bill previous, inserted a new definition for electronic signature at the definition section, section 2, to allow, Madam President, for the use of electronic signature, and at the same time to continue to allow the use of a wet signature as well. And so we would have gone through that discussion previously. I don't think I need to repeat myself. At section 4, we're deleting subsection 8 in its entirety and replacing it with new provisions. Proposed amendment allows for the electronic filing of documents at the registry. So what we are seeing is a mirroring of provisions, innovation, electronic signature and wet signature permitted, but also now the electronic filing. The provisions then in this proposed legislation, this bill that's under debate, mirror to a great extent those that we would have seen in the previous bill that has just been successfully passed. We have added a new subsection 12 to section 8, which allows for filing of documents which contain an electronic signature. And that again is in response to technology and the technological advances in the industry. We have proposed an amendment to section 16 by deleting the existing subsection 4 and replacing it with a new provision relating to the service of documents in a limited liability company. The existing subsection 4 allows for service of process of documents on the registrar in circumstances where a limited liability company fails to maintain a registered agent or where the registered agent cannot be located. The existing provision created an agency arrangement between the registrar and the LLC for service of process under the circumstances. This amendment seeks to remove this requirement as it was thought prudent to no longer allow for service of documents on the registrar on behalf of an LLC. Accordingly, service of process in the circumstances where the registered agent of a limited liability company cannot be located will be effected at the last known address of that LLC. Again, a mirror provision to the IBC legislation we just considered. Further to the amendment of subsection 4, we have deleted the existing subsections 5, 6, 7, 8 under section 16. The provisions explain the procedure to be followed in the event that documents were served on the registrar. Since we have removed that requirement, those provisions are no longer germane. We have inserted a new section 67A. Section 67 of the ordinance was amended to include a new 67A to be inserted immediately after section 67. The new heading was inserted entitled Documents to be Kept by a Limited Liability Company, and that new heading more accurately reflects the requirements under the new provisions. Subsection 1 of section 67A now creates an itemized list of specific documents that are required to be kept by an LLC, which include but are not limited to the articles of organization, the operating agreement, the register of members and class of membership, register of managers, and minutes of meetings of members. There is also a new requirement for the LLC to provide copies of any such documents to its registered agent for the registered agent to maintain at its office. That again goes back, Madam President, to the regulatory environment in which we now operate. That when the regulators call on the registered agent should have documentation on the various limited liability companies that they act as registered agent for. Subsection 2 of section 67A makes provision for the imposition of an obligation for the LLC to notify the registered agent of any changes to its register within 15 days when that change is made. It also imposes an obligation on the LLC to provide the registered agent with written information regarding the physical address at which a register of members is held. And again, for the public, LLCs have members, while IBCs have shareholders. And that is really just a difference in nomenclature. At the end of the day, they are the owners of the entity, but there's a difference in terms of how they're treated. Under the new subsection 3, the limited liability company is required to give notice of any change of the physical address at which a register of members is kept and shall provide that information to the registered agent also within 15 days. Under the amendments, a new subsection 4 was under section 67A, and that new subsection provides for the maintenance of all documents required to be kept for the period of 6 years. Again, mirror provisions to what were just debated. A new subsection 5 was added, and that imposes a penalty on an LLC for failing to comply with the specific provisions under section 67A, and that fine is up to $10,000. Again, I said to our service providers, we prefer for you to comply than to be subject to any fines. Section 102 is amended by deleting the section in its entirety and replacing it with new provisions. Under the existing provision, the applicable penalty was a general penalty for contravention of one or more of the provisions of the ordinance, and we are now treating this with greater level of specificity for fines of up to $10,000. Those really are the changes. Of course, there were no bearer shares because we don't have shares with limited liability companies, so that whole debate about bearer shares is not germane to this particular bill that is under debate. And I don't think there's more that I can add. It is part of the architecture for the financial services industry on the island of Nevis. And I wish this safe passage because it is yet another effort by us to modernize our legislation and ensure that Nevis remains compliant with international standards. May it please you.
Recognize the member for Nevis 3.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I rise just to make a brief contribution to this bill before this Honourable House, the Nevis Limited Liability Company Amendment Bill 2023. And of course, Madam President, just like the previous bill, I don't think it's a controversial bill in any way. But of course, what we are trying to do as an administration, we are trying to ensure that the financial services sector is very well placed and well regulated. Of course, this is a sector that would have brought quite a bit of finances into the island. And we must ensure at all times that we keep pace with what we are doing. We must ensure that this sector has oversight, proper oversight, and we must ensure that at all times that whatever we have to do in terms of the legislation, in terms of updating, we must ensure that we keep pace. Madam President, the bill speaks to some amendments, specifically mostly to filing, mostly to documentation, and of course we would have heard about the penalties as well. Madam President, just like with the first bill, we are looking at electronic filing, and it is important, Madam President, that when we look at these legislation, that we keep pace, and we must ensure that there is room for electronic filing. There could be numerous issues when all of the filing is done manually. Of course, when things are done electronically, there is greater efficiency. It is done quicker, and it moves to ensure that we are more effective and there is greater control with respect to filing. Of course, Madam President, when we look at documentation as well, any company that we're looking at must ensure that there's proper documentation, and the amendments that are properly spelled out here would show the types of documents that these companies must have, these documents that must be updated from time to time. And I must at this time as well say that it is important when we are making updates to legislation that the penalties are properly spelled out, and the penalties are properly spelled out here in the amendment to Section 102. I must at this time, Madam President, give high commendation to the legal department for ensuring at all times that we look at these legislation, that whatever loopholes are there, that they are plugged. We know that we live in a society now where there's always a lot of litigation. And so the companies that are under this act must ensure at all times that they are properly updated, the filings are done, the documents are up to date, and of course they will safeguard themselves from any litigation. Madam President, this piece of legislation, as well as the one before, is meant to ensure that we are up to date. Of course, we know that we have to come here time and time again. I could recall we were here, I think it was a Christmas Eve, 1 year, with regards to financial services. What we do here with regards to our financial services sector is looked at internationally, and we must ensure that we are up to date at all times. So with these few words, Madam President, I wish this bill safe passage through this Honourable House. May it please you.
Thank you. Recognize the member for Nevis 4.
Good afternoon now, Madam President. I rise again to give my contribution to the legislation before us, the Nevis Limited Liability Company Amendment Bill 2023. Madam President, as indicated, it's really just a matter of mirroring what was presented before. We must make the necessary changes to remain compliant with the international regulations as well as local regulations. Madam President, we know that the LLCs can undertake a number of different activities, provide a number of different services. And Madam President, it is important for us to understand the need overall for the various legislative framework that must be provided so that when investors, whether foreign or local, set out to do business, it can be clear what is accepted and what is not accepted. And so my comment here, Madam President, is simply that the provisions of the amended regulation can be upheld because there is a manner where we can have the legislation, but sometimes it is the political will or the will of the government to ensure that what the legislation set out to accomplish is indeed accomplished. And so with that, Madam President, I would say I am happy to see that these amendments are finally being made, and we must also ensure that they're not just made on paper, but that the legislation is upheld for one and all. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Recognize the member for Nevis 2.
I'm so happy to hear the member for number 4 is happy that the legislation is being passed. I think that's a good sign. We're moving in the right direction. There is very little to be said, really. The bill is non-controversial. I hear the admonition that these provisions must be applied across the board. That is certainly a matter for our technocrats. They're the ones who manage the legislation. And certainly, Madam President, we look forward to these amendments being accepted by the industry since they were part of the process, and that we will see more business and an ease of doing business. And as that ranking from the World Bank indicates, moving up that ranking is important for us as a country. So we in Nevis, I think, have made some good strides. I know this is anecdotal, but certainly in the context of alien landholding licenses, for example, Madam President, I think the legal fraternity and the real estate fraternity should have noticed that we process these within 14 days now. We have actually given ourselves that a 14-day period. So by the time it's received and by the time we get a response, it should be within 14 days. And sometimes it's actually considerably less than 14 days, because once the cabinet meets, we process these as a matter of course. And so, Madam President, we hope that this bill would have the unanimous support of the House when it comes to committee stage, and I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Limited Liability Company Amendment Bill 2023 be read a second time. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Limited Liability Company Ordinance, Cap 7.04, and for matters related thereto or connected herewith.
The bill has been read a second time. The House will now move into committee stage.
Clause 7.
The question is that Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 6.
The question is that Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
A moment, please. Okay, I think I have nothing to add.
The question is that Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 5.
The question is that Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 4.
The question is that Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 3.
The question is that Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
The question is that Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 1.
The question is that Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Enacting clause.
The question is that the enacting clause stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Title.
The question is that the title stands part of the bill. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Thank you, members. The House will now resume its sitting.
Madam President, I am proud to report that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Limited Liability Company Amendment Bill 2023 has passed through committee stage with no amendments. And I would respectfully move that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Madam President, I rise to second the motion.
Thank you. The question is that the bill, shortly entitled the Nevis Limited Liability Company Amendment Bill 2023, be read a third time and passed. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Limited Liability Company Ordinance, Cap 7.04, and for matters related thereto and connected herewith.
The bill has been read a third time and passed. Thank you.
Adjournment.
Madam President, I rise to move the adjournment of this House.
rise to just say a few brief words on the adjournment. I bid greetings to the good people of Nevis 5, my beloved constituency. I wish to thank you all for your continued support and prayers. I pledge to continue in my endeavor to represent you to the best of my ability. I wish to thank the member for Nevis 1 for finally constructing the Banjo Road. Of course, it would indeed, the government and your cabinet colleagues, it would indeed bring some relief to the residents in that particular area, and of course, by extension, the people of Cotton Grove. I also wish to take this opportunity to remind members opposite of the need for a bathroom facility to be placed at the Cotton Grove playfield as well as the Jessup's playfield. I know I've been advocating for this to the extent that the good member for number 2 has stated, I believe, on some public forum that I have been harassing him. And I wish to state on record that I will continue to harass him and his cabinet until such become reality. I wish, Madam President, to say happy belated birthday to a young member of my constituency, Miss Catherine Wilkerson, and also to offer congratulations to her on her recent graduation from the University of the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas campus. I believe she obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Education, and I am told that she did extremely well. So I wish to offer congratulations to her as we look forward to the opening of the new school year. To all teachers, principals, students, parents, everyone on the Back to School initiative. I hope that we all are looking forward to the reopening of school. I know as a parent, I am certainly looking forward to the reopening of school. So I wish everyone all the best in those endeavors. Madam President, I wish on a more solemn note to extend condolences to the family of the late Sharina Law. She was a member of the legal fraternity here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So on behalf of myself and my family, I extend sincerest condolences to her family and, of course, to the legal fraternity. Thank you so much, Madam President.
I recognize the member for Nevis 4.
Thank you, Madam President. And on the adjournment, Madam President, I would just like to give a brief summary of what it means to understand for the bills that were passed here today. We know that the financial services is well established here in Nevis. It has stood the test of time. And I can only say that when one understands the importance of operating under the rule of law, you would have the necessary legislative framework. And we can see that back in 1984, when the NRP would have ensured that we have rule of law under which to operate. Madam President, as it is today, times are changing, there are new opportunities, and we must provide the necessary legislative framework. It is well established and well seen that this is something the Nevis Reformation Party has done over the years. As we look, Madam President, there are opportunities that are emerging. We can see the partnership with the Afexim Bank, number of opportunities. We recognize the relationship with the United States of America under the PAC 2030 arrangement. And so, Madam President, as people and investors come to do business, we would want to ensure that the businesses can align with the development agenda of the country. And Madam President, there's a lot of talk, and we hear talk about food security, and we hear talk about diversifying. But Madam President, when I come to this honorable house, I come here because I expect to see the necessary legislation, the necessary ordinances that are needed to move Nevis forward and to take us in a new direction to prosperity. And so while talk is good, Madam President, there is a dire need for some creativity and some new ideas in how we will move Nevis forward. Madam President, on that note, I would just like to say, with regards to my constituency, I would like to say the need and the expectations with regards to the development activities in that constituency. It's no secret. In fact, we would have marched, we would have demonstrated about the need to have a better understanding of what is happening with the Vance Armory International Airport. This is a matter that not only impacts the people of St. James's, but of course, all of Nevis is eager and anxious to find out what will be the next step, or how do we move forward in that area. Madam President, also allow me to take the opportunity to speak here with regards to some of the concerns that I have been hearing expressed, and generally throughout the island of Nevis, with regards to the need for more job opportunities. More job opportunities, not only because of what we recognize that right now there are a high level, relatively high level of employment, but we understand that there's a need for sustainability and to be moving forward. And so people are concerned that while we are so heavily dependent on the tourism sector, there is a need to have more permanent and more sustainable employment opportunities being provided. And Madam President, when I speak, and I speak on behalf of the people of St. James's, Nevis number 5, who would have recognized that there is a new way, a new direction that is coming under the NRP. I definitely speak for the whole of Nevis, all of Nevis, because the concerns that are expressed in Nevis 4, and Nevis 5, indeed, all of the constituencies in Nevis, is the need for more transparency, more accountability, and certainly a more sustainable future, not just for us today, but to provide hope and a brighter future for the generation that is coming. I thank you, Madam President.
Recognize the member for Nevis 1.
Madam President, I rise very briefly on the adjournment, and I consulted my colleague to make sure, Madam President, that I heard what I thought I heard. I want to thank the Honourable Member for Nevis number 4 for saying in Parliament on this 24th day of August 2023 that there is a high level of employment here on the island of Nevis. That was a very interesting point, Madam President, because it shows that there is something good that is happening on the island of Nevis. Madam President, I also want to offer my condolences to the family of the late Bertram Roach, a member of my constituency, and an individual, Madam President, who have had the privilege over 20, 30, 40 years of admiring this gentleman and the example that he has set as a member of the St. Paul's Anglican Church. And, Madam President, his life, I believe, has been the quintessential Nevian life story, one who journeyed to England, one who would have contributed to England, and one who came back and made his contribution to the island of Nevis. But it went a bit further, Madam President, because it was a wonderful love story that, as a young man, I've witnessed between himself and his late wife. And I think, Madam President, while oftentimes these are not necessarily documented in written form, the example that he has shown has certainly left a remarkable mark on our lives here in St. Paul. So I want to offer my condolences to his family for the contribution that he has made to the development of the island of Nevis. And I would even dare say to England, because he spent quite a bit of time in England. I am proud, Madam President, that we took an initiative at the post office a few years ago to honor our centenarians. And he has been one of those centenarians, Madam President, whom we honored last year. And his picture and his remembrance will be for generations to admire. Madam President, I also want to, I think it was the member for Nevis number 5 spoke about the new school year. And while the Minister of Education is not present here today, I want to encourage, Madam President, all of our teachers. I believe that the task of educating our children is not only a noble task, it is also an awesome responsibility, Madam President, in the direction of our country. I want to encourage our teachers to continue to do the task that they have been called upon to do in educating our children. And I want to appeal, Madam President, to our parents and to our students to please work with our teachers, work with the education system, that we can not only ensure that we educate our children, but we can ensure that we have young men and young women who are more than capable of taking this country forward. So I want to encourage our teachers, I want to encourage the entire Ministry of Education and the Department of Education in the soon-to-be open new school term. Madam President, I believe that we have had a very robust and interactive debate today, and I'm hoping that it will continue. With those words, Madam President, I think I would have to second the motion on the adjournment. Thank you, Madam President, for those words.
I recognize the member for Nevis too.
Madam President, I believe that the rules suggest that we are not to engage in controversial matters on the adjournment, and so I won't get into some of what I would have heard. I will simply use this occasion to join the member for Nevis 5 in congratulating Catherine Seabrooks on her birthday, but also on her excellent performance at the University of the Virgin Islands. I think it's a young woman who is going places, and certainly another proud product of the St. Thomas's community. And I wish her all the very best. I believe she is currently traveling, but certainly I hope that these good wishes will reach to her wherever she is. Let me also take the opportunity to join the member for number 5 in expressing condolences to the family of Miss Laws, a young attorney, who I believe most of us would know. I know the family quite well, and it was really sad to see someone so young. I think she is early 30s and a young mother with a 5-year-old child passing on in the way that she did. We know that life is uncertain, Madam President, but when it happens, I don't think any of us is ever ready for it. So I use this rostrum to extend my condolences to her family. Of course, her aunt is our Chief Medical Officer, Ms. Dr. Hazel Laws, and so we know the service that she would have given to us during the COVID pandemic. Let me also take this opportunity to extend condolences to the family of Mr. Bertram Roach. As you would have heard, a centenarian, but for me, somebody who is a very special individual. He and my father, of blessed memory, were fast friends. And so I would have spent a lot of time around Mr. Roach He was a very infectious type of individual, loved to dance, loved life, and I believe that all of us will miss him. I'm particularly pleased to hear from the member for Nevis 1 that this government's initiative to capture the images of those who achieved that milestone of 100 years and to issue postage stamps in their honor, that Mr. Roach was captured. And so we hope that in perpetuity his image will be there. Do we know what stamp it was? $30 stamp? But in perpetuity his image would be captured, and I hope that that provides some comfort. It is a small way of honoring our people who have achieved such milestones. I know Mr. Roach is going to be missed. If I can be allowed a personal reflection, my wife said to me that she no longer has a dancing partner. People would know that dancing is not something that I'm not ashamed. It is, some people can run, some can jump, some can dance. It is not one of the attributes that I lay claim to. But certainly she and Mr. Roach were regular dancing partners, and she commented and reflected on that. But I don't mean to make light of it. It is, of course, a sad time for the family. I would want to say to them, however, that I am hopeful that the prayers of all of us will comfort them, and the knowledge that Mr. Roach lived a full life. And he contributed not just here and in the UK. I think he also spent some time in Trinidad, and he would have contributed wherever he went. And as the member for number 1 said, his love story with his departed wife was really one that all of us would seek to emulate. So may the family know that we are here with them in spirit and in prayer, that they would be comforted, and that the life that he led would be an inspiration for all of us going forward. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, members. The question is that this Honourable House be adjourned. Sign it aye. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This House stands adjourned. Sign it aye.